It started like any other traffic stop, until it turned into something much worse. An elderly black woman, calm and collected, sat behind the wheel, confused as flashing lights filled her rearview mirror. The officer approached, his tone sharp, his patience non-existent. Within moments, things escalated. Yanking open her door, he pulled her out with unnecessary force, ignoring her protests. Bystanders gasped, some pulling out their phones. "You have no right," one shouted. But the cop wasn't listening. He was too busy asserting control. He had no idea who he was dealing with. Then, just as he was about to slap on the cuffs, something changed. A single moment, a few words, and the officer's confidence crumbled. His face paled as realization set in. This wasn't just any woman, she was the city's newly appointed judge. And in an instant, the power shifted. What happened next? You won't believe it. The officer's grip loosened for just a second, but the damage was done. The woman adjusted her coat, her calm demeanor never breaking. "You really don't know who I am, do you?" she said, her voice steady but firm. The crowd murmured, their phones still recording. The officer hesitated, his confidence slipping. "Ma'am, step back," he ordered. His tone had lost its bite. Something in her eyes made him uneasy. A sinking feeling settled in his chest. A second patrol car pulled up, and a senior officer stepped out. His face shifted the moment he saw her. "Judge Richardson?" he asked, his voice laced with disbelief. The first officer stiffened. "Judge?" His mind raced, replaying every aggressive move he had just made. The woman didn't answer right away. Instead, she looked him in the eye and simply said, "I hope you're ready to explain yourself." The officer swallowed hard, his hands twitching as if debating whether to step back or stand his ground. His training told him to stay firm, but the sudden shift in power made his throat dry. The crowd sensed it too, the unease in his posture, the flicker of doubt in his eyes. Judge Richardson dusted off her sleeves, her expression unreadable. "I assume you have a reason for pulling me out of my car like that," she said, her voice sharp but controlled. The senior officer, now standing beside his colleague, shot him a look. "What exactly happened here?" he asked. The younger cop struggled for words. She wasn't cooperating," he stammered. Judge Richardson raised an eyebrow. "Not cooperating," she repeated, "or not obeying without question." The silence that followed was suffocating. The officer had no good answer, and he knew it. He also knew that whatever happened next could change everything. The officer's pulse pounded in his ears. The weight of the crowd's stares pressed down on him. But it was Judge Richardson's steady gaze that unsettled him the most. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't resisting. She didn't need to. Her presence alone was enough to unravel everything. The senior officer cleared his throat. "Let's step aside," he said, motioning for the younger cop to follow. But Judge Richardson didn't move. "No," she said firmly. "This happened right here, in front of everyone. Let's not hide now." A murmur spread through the onlookers. The officer clenched his jaw, trying to regain control of the situation. "You were acting suspicious," he said, his voice quieter now, almost uncertain. Judge Richardson took a slow step forward. "Suspicious," she repeated. "Driving home from work? Or was it something else?" The silence stretched unbearably. The officer shifted on his feet. He knew the answer. So did everyone watching. The officer's mouth opened, but no words came out. The weight of the moment hung between them, thick with unspoken truth. The crowd waited, cameras rolling, eyes locked on every move. Then, just when it seemed like the tension couldn't climb any higher, a new voice cut through the silence. "Is there a problem here?" A deep, authoritative tone rang out as another man stepped forward from the gathering onlookers. The officer's face turned ghostly pale. It was the police chief. He wasn't supposed to be here. He wasn't supposed to see this. But there he was, standing beside Judge Richardson, with a look that said he already knew more than enough. Judge Richardson didn't break eye contact with the officer. "I was just about to find out," she said calmly. The chief exhaled, glancing at the junior officer. Then I think we should all hear the answer. The officer's hands trembled. His career, his reputation, everything was now hanging by a thread. The officer's breath came short and uneven. He knew there was no escaping this. The police chief's stare was heavy, demanding an explanation. Judge Richardson stood firm, waiting. The crowd, still filming, wasn't going anywhere. I made a mistake, the officer finally admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Judge Richardson tilted her head. A mistake, she repeated. Dragging me from my car, humiliating me in front of a crowd, assuming I was a threat. Was that a mistake or a decision? The officer had no answer. The police chief sighed, rubbing his temple. "We'll handle this at the station," he said. "Judge, you have my full assurance." But before he could finish, Judge Richardson held up a hand. "No," she said. "We'll handle this right here." Then, in a stunning turn, she reached into her bag and pulled out a file. "Because as of this morning," she continued, opening it, "I have full oversight of officer conduct in this city." The officer's knees nearly buckled. The crowd erupted. He had thought this was just another routine stop. He had thought he held the power. But now he realized he had just pulled over the one person who could change everything. The officer stood frozen, his world unraveling in real time. Judge Richardson calmly held the file open, letting the reality sink in. "Accountability," she said, her voice steady. "That's what this city deserves." The police chief nodded, stepping forward. "Officer, hand me your badge," he ordered. There was no protest, no argument. Just a quiet, reluctant nod as the officer unhooked it from his uniform and placed it in the chief's waiting hand. Judge Richardson took a breath, scanning the faces in the crowd. "This isn't just about me," she said. "It's about trust, fairness, and making sure what happened today doesn't happen to someone else tomorrow." The phones were still recording. The moment would not be forgotten. As the officer was led away, the crowd slowly dispersed, their whispers lingering in the air. Judge Richardson turned to her car, adjusting her coat. Justice had spoken, and this was just the beginning.